Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
This is Adam.
And I'm Jen.
Today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done. But before we do, I've got some poll results to talk about, as we always do. Also, welcome back, Jen. It's been a little while. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here. I was excited about this one.
All right, right on. So I asked a poll on Twitter. I said, do you buy pre-owned board games or do you only buy new? The options I gave were I only or mostly buy new, I only or mostly buy used, I swing both ways, or I don't buy games at all. Adam, how'd you answer this?
I put I only or mostly buy new games. And why do I do that? I don't know. I just see something I like and I want to pick it up. So I do. And I know that I can probably always sell it later on for close to what I bought it for at a minimal loss. Pass that game on to somebody else. So I don't have any issue with buying something new. I do occasionally go for something used. I think Bridges of Shangri-La was one I bought used. I can't name any right now, but I think there's only a handful that I bought used. So not that many, but I'm not opposed to it by any means.
What about you, Jen?
There wasn't an answer on there for Tim buys all the games. And so since that answer wasn't on there, I obviously didn't participate in the poll. But if I was to answer it seriously, it's primarily new. Unless I find like an old game from like my childhood that I want to buy for the kids, and then I'll go find that version from 1984 that I really, really want to use that one instead of the new cheap cardboard one. And as we all know, I bid like a crazy woman for the last sealed version of the Castles of Burgundy that I like. It wasn't the 20th edition upgrade or whatever. That was a big non-success for all of us.
So Jen, non-success or not, did you buy the newest version of Castles of Burgundy, the fancy one with all the miniatures and color and distinguishable terrain?
So that has been a huge topic of conversation between Tim and Danielle and I. And so I know that Tim bought some version of it, but I think in the end his decision was that he didn't buy the one with the miniatures. So we shall see. I still think I have the greatest version right now, but I am excited about the upgrades to color.
You know, I backed the big premium Kickstarter one. I just didn't back the final add-on with miniatures for every tile. So close enough.
The kids are upset about that one, so we're gonna have to think about that.
Kids, hey, listen, that game was expensive enough. Your kids don't get to touch. They don't touch that game. That's an adults only version of Castle of Burgundy.
So Tim, are listeners able to participate in this poll and answer this with discussion and reply? Where would they do that?
Well, thanks, Adam, for calling that out. Yeah, so I post this on Twitter. I post polls on Twitter every week, and you can always find us on Twitter at BG_hot takes. As many listeners did, a little over 300 answered this poll. Here's how they answered. 49.3% said, I only or mostly buy new. 3% said, I only or mostly buy used. 47.4% said they would buy either. And then 0.3% said they don't buy games at all. For me, I said I would buy either. I tend to buy mostly new just because it's just easier. If there's something I have in mind and I want to buy it, great. Also, a lot of the times they're like online retailers will give discounts or have sales where I can get it cheaper than I could probably buy it used for most people. So that's where I end up picking up a lot of games that I just want to try. I'll kind of rent this game. I'll try it out. If I don't like it, then I just pass it on. And that's a good way to do it. And I'm happy to do that used too, but it's just like a pain in the butt to buy used games from people, trying to buy them through eBay or buy them online. So unless it's really convenient, then I just don't bother.
What are some of your biggest used purchases?
I purchased Praga Capu Regni from somebody at a local marketplace, and that was fine, except I pre-committed to it, and then they didn't tell me that the box was damaged, so that was really annoying. So I paid almost retail price. I paid like $45 for it, and it has a big scratch down the side of the box. Not a big deal, but it probably means I won't get $45 if I go to sell it, and I'm honest about it. But I did pick up, I was at a convention recently, and I picked up Under Falling Skies, which is this solo game by CGE that I really wanted to try, and it's like a $30 retail game, and somebody had it there for $10. And it was clear opening up the box, they probably played it once, if at all, and they had never touched any of the like campaign modules in it or anything like that. So this is practically a new game. So that was an awesome purchase. So those are the types of things I'm looking for.
And I'm curious if it influences anyone's decision whether or not like they like the process of punching a game out or not. Because I do not appreciate the process of punching a game out, especially one that has a ton of pieces. I know that Tim gets a kick out of it. My kids get a kick out of it. I'm curious, Adam, do you get a kick out of a brand new game and punching all the materials out?
It can be a process. I think Tim and I opened and punched Anachrony, and the two of us spent an hour, at least hour and a half,
At least. Yeah, it was probably more than
punching
that.
and organizing all the components in there. But if it's something brisk, if there's maybe one sheet, yeah, I do like just punch, 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 punch. That's a nice kind of feeling. You got some little hanging chads. You can wipe those off the bottom and organize all your... But it can get overwhelming, totally, Jen. I get that. It can be like a lot of work. And I believe there were some respondents that had something to say about that.
Yeah, well, let me share that with you. And again, if you follow us on Twitter and respond to these polls, you can also comment on them, and I'll often read some of the comments on here. So I picked a couple, and the first one kind of relates directly to that. This is our friend Seth Gonzalez. He said, I buy new. I want to be the first person to pop the plastic, punch pieces, handle the minis, smell the rule book. I'll be social with you and play games with you, but that's where it ends. I don't want your used games. I also don't want to buy your Sony Walkman cassette player. So Seth had some strong feelings about making sure his games are new when he gets them.
Very strong feelings.
Another listener said, this is Deviates. I often buy used games. I'm more willing to try something I wouldn't usually consider if I can get it for a much cheaper price. So yeah, 100%. Like sometimes if I see a used game that I'm like, well, I was kind of interested in trying that. If it's cheap enough, that's a great reason to buy it. But that's also where I end up just buying things at like 50% off sales. Thomas James said, I found most of the used games on a Facebook marketplace are priced too high plus shipping. Even if you're able to find the game you want at a good price, you still have to hope you're the first one to message the seller and then go through the whole hassle of setting up the whole transaction. So too much of a hassle to buy used. And one more in that line of thought, and that's Berrylicious, said, I'd love to buy more used if they weren't so overpriced. Like, sorry, pal, I'm not driving 20 minutes to your house to save $2. So yeah, great points here. And I think, like people in our hobby, they kind of treat it like, I bought this game, I want to get the same amount I just paid for it. But it's just not worth that much when you can get new games at a discount for the most part. So that was an interesting look into how our listeners buy games. I think we can jump into a description of Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done.
In Crusaders, Thy Will Be Done, 2 to 4 players take the role of various Grand Masters of militaristic orders, which is paraphrased straight from the rulebook. As one of these Grand Masters, you will move knights, defeat enemies, build buildings, and gain influence throughout Europe. At the end of the game, the player who's amassed the most influence is the victor. Actions are controlled via individual blended Mancala rondel wheel systems. What does that mean? Imagine a hexagon sliced into 6 pieces, with each piece representing an action. Players are given roughly 12 action tokens that are distributed across the 6 pieces. So, if I have 4 action tokens on the travel action slice of hexagon, I can travel up to 4 areas across Europe on the main board. Then, those 4 action pieces are distributed, 1 per slice, clockwise onto the next action wedges. The more action pieces on a wedge, the stronger that action. So much of the puzzle becomes managing the action tokens and getting them to cluster on a single action. Actions include traveling, mustering, crusading, building, and gaining influence. We already talked about traveling. Mustering increases the strength of your crusade action. Crusading allows you to defeat enemies and open a space for building. Building boosts the power of other actions and provides influence. And the gain influence action gets you some points. Finally, instead of taking an action, players can upgrade a wedge, allowing them 2 actions on that wedge in the future. Any tokens that were on that wedge prior to upgrading get redistributed like we talked about before. The game ends when the preset number of influence points are exhausted from the pool, and again, the player with the most influence is the winner. Crusaders That Will Be Done is designed by Seth Jaffe and originally published by Tasty Minstrel Games in 2018, and recently picked up by Renegade Games Studios.
All right, welcome back. So let's jump into the gameplay and mechanisms of Crusaders Thy Will Be Done. Now, this was a second play for me. I played once with the physical production, and this was a first play on Board Game Arena for Adam and Jen. What do you guys think of the gameplay and mechanisms?
It was interesting. So the thing that's first and foremost for me was this, is it a mandala or like a
Mancala.
Mancala. It's a Mancala. Thank you. So yeah, you're kind of managing your wooden cylindrical hexagons on this Mancala that give you these different actions. You start with 6 spots to put these, and I believe at least 2 of the actions are the same, maybe across from each other. So however many of these hexagons you have in one of these sectors, that's how strong that action is going to be. So you're kind of planning ahead. You're taking the action this turn and forward thinking for what you're going to do in the next 2 or 3 or 4 turns down the road. So I thought that was was kind of neat. I don't know if I've played any game like that. I guess there's a name for it in Mancala, but I've never played a game that has that system in it.
Yeah, the Moncala mechanism was kind of neat because coincidentally, we had found an old Moncala game in my family, and so me and the kids started playing with it just this week. And so it was kind of neat to see the evolution, right? Like we are playing Moncala, like genuine Moncala. This is the game. And then now we're using Moncala as a mechanism inside of a strategy game that I'm playing with my adult friends. And so that was it was kind of neat to see that. And I, as a kid, loved Moncala, and then I haven't thought about it probably for 30 years. And so to use that inside of this game was really neat. I'm curious if I struggled with where they were going to land on the screen. I don't know why. When we redistributed the tokens, so you used one, like Adam said, you used one to travel, and then those tokens were redistributed, and your other powers or your other options were more powerful the next time as they were distributed, as long as you got a token there. And I had a lot of trouble for some reason, like the visual aspect of figuring out where those were going to land. And you'd think it's really simple. I'm not sure if it was the online gameplay versus the in-person gameplay, but I could not figure out where they were going to land. And I felt like that hurt once I figured out, kind of how to use some pieces of my strategy to move forward. I'm wondering if that, it probably hurt me, but I'm wondering if I could overcome that with in-person play or if I could overcome that with more practice in the online platform.
Well, I can't answer that for you, Jen, but interestingly, this mechanism was used heavily in Stefan Feld's game Trajan, which I had a chance to play recently and I talked about. That one I did have the same issues you're talking about. And the thing that Crusaders did that I think was a little bit of an improvement, and I would bet that Seth Jaffe probably had played Trajan and definitely took inspiration from it because it feels very similar. But the thing that's different is that in Trajan, when you pick up those tokens, it's where you land, where your final token gets dropped. That's where you take the action. And that was a lot more challenging for me to kind of think ahead and say like, well, this is the action I'm trying to do. So I got to start from this bowl and work my way forward. Versus with Crusaders, it was a little bit easier for me, at least on the second play, to just have a good picture of it. But I also felt like it wasn't that meaningful. Sometimes it was, but it seemed like most of the time I really just wanted to do the best action that I could that turn, and then the rest of the tokens get dropped where they need to. Occasionally, I would say like, well, there's not a great option, so what do I want to set myself up for next turn? And that's where it would make a difference. But I think most of the time I wasn't really planning that well. Still managed to win, but I don't think I was planning as carefully as you guys were.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, just way to slip that in there. So I thought it was neat that the knights, I think they're called, each individual knights give you a little twist on what you can do with that Mancala system. So mine, for instance, as I was redistributing my little hexagons within my giant hexagon, I could skip a sector and accumulate more in different actions that I want to do. So just that extra little piece of planning, I thought that little asymmetry was nice. I know there was one, I think they let you go distribute counterclockwise as opposed to clockwise, and there was a couple that let you do just different kind of things. So I thought those little twists were nice too.
Those are called the orders because basically you're representing an order of knights, and so those are your asymmetric abilities, which are pretty simple. And that was nice. It gave everybody a little bit of a different thing to play with, but it wasn't a lot to keep track of. Some of them were a quick setup change, and then most of them had like one ongoing benefit or difference in how you use your action tokens.
I know that, it's probably designed in a way that's fair, but it was interesting. I'm trying to think of the games that I've played in the past where you didn't start at the exact same place, right? Like, I guess when you place a starting tile, you don't start at the exact same place because that's human decision. But this also, you get those two options. Tim and I have been playing Viticulture lately, and I guess you do. You get what are they, winemakers at the beginning, and you choose two of those?
Yeah, the mamas and papas cards.
Mamas and papas cards. So I guess you do. Like, as I'm sitting here working it out verbally, I'm realizing that there are places where you do start with different powers. It was neat. I'm curious how you'd felt like, would you rather get a card that had an opening power or had a continuous power?
Yeah, the continuous powers felt more fun to play around with because I had one that just gave an opening power, gave you the extra knight. And then it gave me I think it did give me an ongoing +1 move bonus, but it didn't feel as impactful as the ability to manipulate the tokens. I don't know that I have no idea how balanced they are. And I don't really care. I've mentioned this in the past. I don't really care that much about balance. We're probably not going to play a game enough times to be so expert at it that the balance difference between one of these factions is going to make that much impact. None of them seem drastically overpowered from what I've seen so far.
Asymmetric starting powers is the one thing we talk about a lot. Even terraforming Mars, you have different little factions that give you a different little starting power. Root we talk about is one that has crazy, each player is playing kind of a different game. Circadians, Chaos Order, one we just recently played, has some highly asymmetric. So yeah, this whole spectrum of, are you starting in a different place than everybody else, or is it, not so much, just something a little different push in a different direction, or something just different to play around with this game than you played last game. And this one is more towards that, just a little something different this game than last game. Not something highly asymmetric, just a little different nudge in a different way, a different little puzzle to try to solve this time. So I think that's a interesting note that you make about maybe this is one of your earlier introductions to or your first time you've noticed something that's a little bit different starting power than some of the other games you played.
I do. I like, it's funny. As I worked it through verbally, I discovered that how many games I've probably done that in. And I'm thinking even some of the ones that we've played here on the podcast together. But I've never thought about it. And so it's interesting, like, where did it hide in the game for me? Was it not significant? Was it something at the beginning that I wasn't ready? As we know, when I learn a new game, I am a click button, move tiles, whatever it is, until I figure it out. And so I think that as I learning new games, the very beginning of the game would definitely be something that would just get glossed over, and I just randomly like throwing something at the wall and hoping it sticks at that point in time. And so that's why I'm guessing, which makes sense to me right now, that stuff really hasn't been brought to the forefront of my mind. But this one, for some reason, was significant enough for me to think about it and talk about it.
What I think this game really is through and through is an engine builder. I mean, almost every action you're doing, you're building buildings, which is going to make your actions more powerful, upgrading your troops, which is making your crusade actions more powerful. And so all across, basically what you're just trying to do is like do these little things that make you be able to do those things a little bit better throughout the course of the game. And I think it works really well here. It's really streamlined. Those buildings are pretty neat in that as you place them out on the board, they make one of your other actions stronger, but the further up you get a specific set of buildings, then they get even bigger. The bank is the one that gives you the +1 build action. And when you put out the first and second one, it just adds +1 to your build action. When you put out the third one, it gives you +1 build and +1 influence. And when you put out the fourth one, it now is going to give you an end game scoring benefit, 4 points for every building, every level 4 building you've built. And that's kind of how all of the different 4 tracks of buildings work. Pretty streamlined. I wonder how much it's going to feel like it changes that much. I've now played 2 games of this, and they felt pretty consistent, pretty similar as far as how the gameplay played out. So it feels like one of those games that isn't going to feel really that unique in what you're doing or the variability of the game, but more a little bit about the how efficient can you get at it? How smart are you about what's the right thing to do at this time so that you're racing other people to it? I don't know how long that's going to last for me in this particular game, but I still had fun with it on a second play, and I think there's still some more fun to pursue there. But yeah, anyway, the engine building is pretty streamlined, pretty clever.
It is. It's quick, right? So you have any of the build actions and the muster action, I believe, are all gonna promote your engine or add to your engine building ability. So if you're not doing that, you're traveling, crusading, or getting influence, which is just getting points. So those are like the ones that don't give you any. So about half of the actions here promote your engine. So if you can get those going first, then you have stronger actions as the game goes on. So yeah, it is a nice, quick engine building thing. And to touch on more about what you're talking about, the race element too, there's very much of a race element here. You're trying to expand mostly to the east and get those buildings out, because once there's a building in a territory, that's it. No one else can put a building there. Or what else are you trying to do? You try to conquer one of these 3 other people, which is kind of sad. But, that gives you points too, and once that's gone, it's gone. So yeah, you have this race element and this engine building element that are kind of at the forefront too.
Yeah, one last thing I forgot. That's the other part I was thinking of engine building, and that's that you can also upgrade your actions on the board. And the way you do that basically is you've got these 6 different sections that you're moving your Mancala tokens around, and they each represent one type of action. But you can take a turn to just flip one of those over. So you're giving up a turn to do it, but what that does is it then makes that into 2 different actions. And the neat thing about that is that if you have, like, the problem with the Mancala type thing is like, hey, I only need 5 of these tokens to build a building, but I've got 7 in there. Well, I've just wasted 2 of them. But now if you can flip one of those over and you've got 2 actions available, you can spend 5 to build a building and the other 2 to do an influence, or the other 2 to do a move. So that was a pretty clever way to add to the engine as well. I don't know still what's the right tempo to do that in. Like, I've been just doing it when I don't feel like I've got another good action to do. But I wonder if upgrading those all early and just not making a lot of progress on your other engine building early, if that would actually be a big benefit. Maybe not. I don't know. That's something I guess that's worth playing around with a little bit more.
It is interesting because I felt like the biggest waste was continually the travel ones. The travel tokens continually got wasted. Like all of a sudden, I'd have 7 in travel because I didn't need to travel because I had to spend some significant time gaining enough tokens to build or crusade. And so these travel spaces would be loaded and then I'd use them. I had not upgraded them at the time. And so now I have 7 or 8 in this travel section. And there's 2 travel sections on the board for that matter. And so that's also interesting. And I need to go 2. I mean, I could go 7. If I do have 2 nights, I can go more than that. But it didn't make sense to use all of them based on where I was trying to go at that point in time. And so it seems like that upgrade mechanism would be really, really beneficial with that.
Yeah, that's where it gets really useful because, right, you can do a build and then immediately move your token to the next space that you either want to crusade or do another build in or whatever, versus having to take a whole action just to move. So I think you're right. I think upgrading those move actions is probably a key strategy here.
It could also allow you to get that power over someone else. If someone else is sitting in a space, you have the ability, they might think, oh, no one's going to build here, no one's going to conquer here. Fight? And it's not fight. What
Crusade.
is it? Crusade! No one's going to crusade right now, but you can actually use those 2 action items then to get in there and crusade right in front of them. And now they've moved to that space for almost no purpose.
Yeah, and that's probably the primary place of player interaction in this game as well, really. I mean, there's a bit of just racing for the point pool, which is something we haven't mentioned. There's basically a pool of points, and when those points are all gone, then the game ends. I think another game that does that is like Race for the Galaxy, right, Adam?
Yeah. Depending on player count, you have 24 points in there, and then once those are gone, that's a game end trigger.
Yeah. So in this game, it was like with 3 players, I think it was 200 points. So you're kind of racing for the points, but then you're also racing to crusade earliest so that it makes it harder for other people to crusade against a specific faction, or I don't know exactly what we're attacking here. We'll get into that in theme in a little bit here. But basically, as you attack one of these other civilizations, then basically the cost to attack them goes up higher. So a little bit of it is about just trying to race and saying like, oh, I can see that they're going to try to hit that silver one next. If I can go in there and hit that, then they're not going to be able to do it on their turn. So there's a lot of those little micro interactions, which are not super impactful, but if you do pay attention to what the other people are doing, it's going to benefit you a little bit.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. You do have to pay attention to the other players a little bit. Where are they going? Did they already build there? Do they have enough tokens in their crusade spot to conquer these people right now or to build a building right now? Can I swoop in there and get this stuff before they do? Yeah. And then the cost to crusade, you touched on it a little bit, Tim. I guess that kind of represents an increasing cost to do this stuff, kind of an economy. Things get more expensive as the game goes on, and there's less to attack, less to do. Yeah, so that was neat. I don't know if it was necessarily super fun, but I thought it was notable.
I did want to mention really quickly that one of the reasons why this game was on my radar right now and why we decided to play it is that it did just come up on Board Game Arena. It's in beta right now, but seems to be a pretty decent implementation. But also the long-awaited expansion for this game is about to be published, maybe shipping out to people who pre-ordered it. And I got a chance to take a look at that expansion a little bit. And so I thought I'd just mention really quickly what's in there. Thought you guys might be interested in this as well, because the expansion's up on Board Game Arena as well. So you can just add this in right away. First of all, today there's 16 buildings you can build, 4 of 4 different types. So one of the things the expansion adds is an entire another board that has another 16 buildings on it. So you end up with a total of 32 buildings that you can build. Thought that was pretty interesting. One of the things that's different about those buildings, they generally do the same types of things like improve the value of some of your actions, but some of them can be placed, I think all of the new buildings can be placed on spaces with buildings you already have. And some of them are discounted if you place them with a specific type of building. So you can kind of plan and say, hey, I'm going to build a bank here, and then I can build a windmill next to that bank, and it's only going to cost me 3 build. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility in some of the build actions. And I would assume would feel like it definitely gives you a lot more routes to take in as you're kind of building out your I'll call it a tech tree, but then, the directions you're going to go in a game. I think it could make it feel a lot different. Now, the expansion is called Divine Influence. So as you can imagine, it's related to the influence action. Influence action in the base game is a little dull. All it does is gives you points. It's usually not an action you want to take early, but it may be a way that you get a big group of points when you just have a lot of tokens there. The new Divine Influence expansion changes that, where there's these random influence tokens kind of seeded throughout the board, and they're treated almost like the Crusades. So now you would go to a space that has one of these tokens, and you'd spend your influence to take this token off the board. And I think it gives you like an immediate benefit, but also makes it easier to travel through that region. So I thought that was a little bit more interesting and probably be a little more fun to play around with, to have kind of that one extra little mini goal to play with. Otherwise, it adds some more orders, so there's some more variability in the starting setup. And I think that's about it. It's a pretty streamlined expansion, but I think for this game, it would probably have a pretty good impact on at least the variety of what you can do. Let's jump into the theme and production of Crusaders that will be done. As I mentioned, I did get to play this in person one time, and I was pretty impressed with it. Now, there was an original like Kickstarter deluxe version. We're not going to talk about that today because I don't think it's available anymore. In fact, the company that was publishing this, TMG, went out of business recently. Renegade Game Studios just picked this up. So they're going to be publishing the new version, and I think you'll only be able to get kind of the standard edition. But I played with the standard edition, and I'll be honest, I was pretty impressed with it. It's all really thick cardboard as far as like the player boards and the components. The buildings are all unique sculpts, so you're putting out these wooden pieces out on the board that are all fine and, you know, chunky. The colors, I think the colors are nice and vibrant, although some of the player colors tend to blend in with the colors on the board. So that was my only complaint about the production. But otherwise, I think it's a really nice production for, you know, a game that's kind of this streamlined and simple.
Yeah, the production looks great, Tim. I do like the simplicity. You don't have all these giant miniatures. You don't need giant miniatures in this one. You have your cool little wooden hexagons, your cool little wooden building figures. It's kind of simple, I guess simple when you contrast it with something like Ankh or Eclipse, but that's all you need. And it does what it does really nice with this sort of minimalist look to it. But yeah, like you said, I had the red or burgundy color that kind of blended in with the oceans in this case, which were also blood red, which was kind of scary. That was my only complaint with the production as well. Otherwise, super nice looking production here.
Yeah, it was simple enough to be understandable, but distinctive and detailed enough to be enjoyable. And I think that's something that is hard to achieve.
All right, well, let's touch briefly on the theme here. So from my perspective, you know, when I hear crusade, I'm thinking about Christians going out and essentially trying to enslave and convert other people to think the way they do. It was a dark time in the Middle Ages when the Crusades were happening. That's basically the theme of the game. You're these orders of knights that are going out and conquering or crusading people and other lands and taking them over and getting victory points for it. I don't feel very good about that. Now, the designer wrote a section in the rulebook that kind of explains that this was, I think he's trying to reference that it's kind of like a generic implementation of the concept of crusading, but not trying to be a real world situation. And in fact, even says that some of the enemies that you're out there crusading against maybe didn't even exist during the true crusades. So that's kind of the explanation that was given there. It still feels like it was a theme. The mechanism in this game, I think, could have been put on a lot of different themes that would have been much more enjoyable for me to play. As is, I kind of feel bad going out and, you know, knocking out these people out of their land and getting points for it. You know, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, Tim, I can't think of much that I get less jazzed about than going and conquering people in the name of a religion. That's a pretty rough one for me. We talked about it during the gameplay. The mechanisms are cool. There's so much other themes out there that you could slap these mechanisms on without this dark period in history and stuff. The only cool thing I think about is that guy in Indiana Jones guarding the cup. You know, you chose poorly. So, I don't know. Yeah, theme was a little rough for me.
I think that was the Knights Templar, and they're actually one of the orders of knights that you can play in this.
Oh, well, never mind about all the things I said about theme. That's cool then.
Yeah, I just kept getting Monty Python jokes in my head throughout the whole time. That's kind of, I guess, how I rectified playing a game that was super dark.
There you go. See, they should have put a Monty Python theme on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, add a little humor to it or make it satirical or something, yeah.
Yeah, I would have definitely chosen the Knights That Say Knee. And then, I mean, who knows what at that point in time that my special ability would have been. So, like, you get to just slap coconuts together for the next hour and a half while you're playing this game.
Well, obviously, I would be Tim, the great wizard. Tim.
I would have been throwing the holy hand grenade of Antioch around
there you
for
go.
sure.
That's the next expansion is what's going on here. So you're welcome.
All right, so let's go to our final question. Would you request to play this game again and kind of give our final thoughts around it?
I think I would request to play this again now that it's on Board Game Arena, especially we talked about, hey, this would be nice for async. or in person. It's not that long. It's pretty quick. I think once you're familiar with it, this game you could get done in 30 to 45 minutes, something like that. The Mancala mechanism is cool enough, and I want to. We talked about upgrading those things early and seeing how that works out. Being able to have kind of 2 actions in one of those hexagon sectors. There's a lot here to explore. Maybe not a lot. There's a little bit here to explore, and I want to explore more, at least for now. So yeah, I'd request to play this one again, even though the theme is still like a big old downer on me. But yeah, sure, I'd request to play it again.
It feels streamlined enough and teachable / learnable in a way that this could be brought into like Tim and myself and Danielle playing a game. And so I like that concept of playing a game and we learn it and then we get to bring it into real human interaction. So that's always exciting for me. I think with this one it'll be possible. I really do want to see it up close. I'm curious. Sounds like Tim has access to one, so maybe at some point in time we can rent it or borrow it from a friend of his to see if it plays as enjoyable in person as it does in the online platform. That would be big for me to know if I would want to play it again. The online for me, it's hard on my phone. The board game arena, it was hard on my phone, and then it wasn't much better for me on the actual desktop version. And I don't know if I just wasn't manipulating it correctly. The concept, it was enjoyable. The dopamine hits happened, but the actual visual experience for me was frustrating.
Yeah, this was an interesting interface on Board Game Arena. It's pretty nice, but you do have to, the main map of the board is, it kind of takes up the whole top of the screen, and you have to scroll down every time to look at your action board. Now, they kind of put the little Mancala up when you're up at the map, you see your little Mancala up there, and you can actually interact with the actions there. But if you want to look at your buildings or look closer at the Mancala, and by the way, the text on those is pretty small, so it's very hard to read when you're looking it up on the map. So it was a little bit of a clunky interface compared to some of the other games we've seen, just that there's a lot of scrolling up and down to see everything you need to see with it. But otherwise, I thought it was an okay implementation. My take on it is that I enjoyed this game. I think it does a really good job of being a thematic engine builder. Even if the theme doesn't hit for us, at least you feel like you're building this engine that isn't just like, hey, I'm just taking this card and turning it into another card, like something like Splendor, or even, games like Space Base, where there really is zero theme. Here, the engine building felt like you were putting buildings out there and you're moving around this map and you're crusading. And so it was kind of neat that for this streamlined engine building game, you got some, thematic touches in there. I think it does that really well. I'm not sure how much replayability it has for me. However, I do think the expansion could blow that up a little bit. And so I probably the next game I try on Board Game Arena, I'll try it with the full expansion and see how that changes things. Because I think having access to all of those other buildings that you can upgrade will probably change the paths that people go down a little bit more and give you more options to do build actions when you wouldn't otherwise, which will, change some of the other actions. So definitely interested in exploring it. This is a really pretty tight package. I think it fills a hole that I don't have filled in my collection, which is, again, kind of a very short, streamlined, but thematic feeling game. And I think it does a pretty good job of that. So I think Crusaders I Will Be Done is worth a try for sure. And probably will be something I'll get to play once in a while. I probably won't be asking for it every week, but it's a game that I enjoyed and would be happy to go back to. All right, well, that will wrap up the conversation on Crusaders I Will Be Done. We'll jump into some games that have been on our table and some future takes right after this. All right, welcome back. So, Adam, what have you had on your table lately?
I've had on my table Imperium Legends. This is designed by Nigel Buckle and David Turczi and published by Osprey Games. And it's like a civilization deck building game. There's Imperium Legends and there's Imperium Classics. And each of these boxes has, 6, 7, 8 different civilizations. So I played as the Olmecs. That's the Latin American, so it's like the Mayan civilization back in the day. And you're actually learning a lot as you're playing these different civilizations. Each has a unique deck, and they all do something different. They're all very asymmetric, going back to what we were talking about earlier. So each civilization is trying to do something a little bit different than the other ones, and the way that they score points. This is different than a lot of other deck builders as well. The market row, so like in Star Realms, you just flip out 5 or 6 random cards or whatever it is out there, and you just buy them up and throw them into your deck. Here, there is a very organized market. This section of cards is going to be a civilization card. This section is going to be a location card. Over here, you have this type of card. And then, whatever's left over, you jumble that up into a big old deck and you have the common market card. But it's a very constructed market, which I thought is kind of cool. In addition, every time you turn your deck over at the end of your turn, you might be adding one of these civilization-specific cards to your deck. Basically, every other turn, you're going to add one of these cards to your deck, shuffle it in, and now you have sort of some automatic progression that happens as you're playing this game. So a lot of interesting things to explore here. I thought this game has a lot of potential. I only briefly looked at it as I was playing with Sarah one night, but I want to get back to this. I want to shuffle these up. It's supposed to be good as a solo game or as a 2-player game. Any more than that, it can get a little convoluted, a little long, because it is a very thinky deck builder in contrast to something like Star Realms, where it's quick, back and forth, boom, boom, boom. So yeah, that's Imperium Legends and Imperium Classics. 2 boxes, same set of rules with all these ancient civilizations based in history, and you can learn a lot from playing these games as well.
Yeah, how long did a 2-player game of this take you and Sarah? I know it was your first game, but what is this, like an hour play?
Closer to 90 minutes, I think. So you got the setup, which takes a little...
So it's a pretty long...
Yeah, you got the setup. It's going to take a little while, and then as you're going through... At least that's where we're at right now. We're not trying to race through this game. We're taking our time as we're going through, trying to make some smart choices, seeing what the market are. There's a lot of different things you can do. You could probably get it down to about an hour with 2 players. But for us right now, about 90 minutes, I'd say.
Does the gameplay justify that time, that length? Like, do you feel like you're getting enough interesting gameplay out of it to make it that big of a game?
Good question. I think if we can get it down to 60 minutes for sure. And right now we're still exploring it, so I don't have a good answer. If it's going to be 90 minutes for the rest of my life, probably not. But if we can get these games down to an hour or less at 2 players, heck yeah, that'll be a fantastic deck building, kind of expansive, growing, nice arc, especially with the educational elements in there. I learned a lot in this little first play, and that was just 2 different civilizations. And there's 12 more in there to check out. So, yeah.
Very cool. I've heard great things about the solo mode too, although I understand it can be pretty complicated to run, which is David Turksy kind of hallmark. So if you ever get a chance to play that solo, check back and let us know, or let me know at least. This has been kind of like right on my list for a little while because I'd like to try it out.
Yeah, I plan on definitely exploring that solo mode much more.
Cool. Jen, what have you been playing?
We've been playing the standard Castles of Burgundy, also Viticulture. Wonderland's War was on the table for a good solid week and a half. I was mentioning to Tim that we had encountered a random strategy board game where we're staying called Memoir 44. And so my boys took that sucker out, read the directions from beginning to end, watched a Rodney walkthrough video, and played by themselves the first time. So my 11-year-old and my 6-year-old. It was amazing. I sat down and played it for a little while, and I could not understand what was going on.
That's that game where you're playing different scenarios from World War II, I believe. So you have the book, and you're setting up different guys and different terrain and different this and different that.
I think it's Richard Borg is the designer.
Oh, you're totally, yeah.
Okay. So you played this, Adam.
I used to have it back in the day, and I had this Memoir 44 air pack that I dug up, I don't know, a year ago, and it was like the original one, and there was, I think, 8 little painted airplanes in there, and I never used, so I ended up selling that thing for like $90, $60. The thing went for a ton of money. But yeah, originally I bought this way back at the same time I bought like Race for the Galaxy, and I got this other game called Lucasita. Some old school games I started getting into and played them, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, and then they got stashed away and sold maybe a year ago.
Yeah, how long is way back?
Oh man, so back in my Nebraska days, I want to say like 08,
Oh, wow.
09, if the game was even around back then, 06, 07, 08, somewhere back in there.
Instruction booklet, and there was the other booklet in there, and it looked like it's published or by the same people as do Ticket to Ride. And so it was Days of Wonder.
Yeah, Days of Wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jen, did you think this? You said that you didn't quite understand what was going on. Does this game feel like overly complicated to you, or is this like a Jen, I hate learning new board games level of overly complicated, where after you actually played one time, then you'd be like, oh, okay, I got it now.
Well, let's go into all the factors quickly. Number one, I was taught by an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. But they seem to understand it perfectly. Number two, I don't love learning new board games. No, I don't love the learning process, but normally once we can get past that like barrier of I'm in misery, if I like a game, I like a game. I I don't even know if I've played war games yet, but I don't like thematically this one's really going to hit hard for me. I don't like this concept is, I mean, you're blowing people up, you are killing them, there is no other way to put it. And so that for me, like, I'm sure there's other games, I don't want to think about it right now, that I play where that's the concept, but it just didn't seem so blatant. Like, we're sitting there with tanks and guns and all of that, which is probably why it appealed to the 11 and 6-year-old boys, and it had zero appeal to me.
Well, there was no bloodshed in the Crusades, so don't need to worry about that.
None. We none.
Jen, you had Wonderland's War on the table. What are your thoughts on that game?
Oh, I love it. It's so pretty, number one. Like, the artwork is fantastic. It attract, like, my 11-year-old just likes to look at the box and he's like, when are we gonna play Wonderland's War? I want to watch you play Wonderland's War. I want to learn how to play Wonderland's War. So that's amazing anytime that you get that kind of family involvement. I like the bag building and that, pulling it just like Quacksaquidlenburg in that way, but there feels like there was, a little more strategy. I'm not sure about if there actually was or wasn't. I like the multiple components. You're going around the board, you're racing for placement. There's just lots of components going on at once, which normally I wouldn't like. But somehow with this one, maybe it's that it's so pleasant to look at. Maybe it's that each piece is simple enough to understand. But I really liked it, and I have asked for it since. We learned it at like 4th of July, I swear, at like 9:30 at night. And so I was like, really, it was like, okay, Tim, it's Tim's time. Like, Tim wants to, like, he put it all on the table. He wanted to teach us. It was really important to him. So Danielle and I sat down and did it. But I think I yawned 474 times. But it didn't mean I wasn't enjoying it. It just meant that I could have been sleeping.
We played it again after that, didn't we? We played a second game like a couple days later.
I think we've played at least 2 games of it. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
And so I think I played the Cheshire Cat both times. So there you go. It's either factions of knights that are going out and murdering and converting people, or it's factions of characters from a rather dark children's tale.
Yeah, well, Wonderland's War actually is a way more asymmetric than Crusaders is. So you had a lot of different stuff to keep track of from that perspective. I think you also won both games, which
nice job.
It's frustrating.
Nice job,
we need to get it played again.
Yeah, we should. Are you going to break? So this weekend, Tim and Danielle and our families, we're going to go to Sedona for our big inaugural Sedona weekend.
What's been on your table, Tim?
All right, so I got a chance to play the new cooperative expansion for Viticulture, which is called Viticulture World. Still My Games sent us a review copy of this, and Viticulture World, the cooperative expansion, was designed by Meher Shah and Francesco Testini. The art, which was originally done by Beth Sobel in Viticulture, on this particular expansion, Andrew Bosley stepped in and did a pretty nice job of recreating that world. Yeah, so I had a chance to play this quite a bit. So again, I mentioned this is a cooperative expansion, so this is not an expansion you can add in and play competitively. But other than that, it has a lot of the same DNA as the base Viticulture game, with some really, really cool twists, I think. So let me talk about those twists really quickly. Essentially, everybody's still playing with their own vineyard boards. That's no different. You're still trying to build up your own vineyard and make wine and fill orders. The difference is that you're working together to do this. And the way that you are going to succeed in this game is every player that's playing has to hit 25 points with their vineyard. And then there's a shared track where I think it's an influence track where you have to hit 10 influence. So aside from doing the normal vineyard building and wine making activities you do in viticulture, you're also taking some activities that are going to push this influence track up. This game does it kind of unique. There's a new board that replaces the original board. And essentially, you've got a bunch of worker placement spots, just like in regular viticulture, and it's set over 2 seasons. The difference here, a couple minor changes. Number one is that when you train workers in Viticulture World Cooperative Expansion, you're not adding new workers. Everybody starts with 4 workers in their Grande worker. So you're not adding new workers. Instead, what you're doing is that at the start of the game, you put 2 blue hats. Put blue hats onto your workers and yellow hats onto your workers. So they're seasonal workers. The yellow ones can only be used in the summer, and the blue ones can only be used in the winter. So if you train a worker, you take one of those hats off, and now this is a trained worker, a skilled worker. They can be used on any season. And there's also some other benefits that skilled workers get. So that's one of the changes. And it's actually quite clever, because one of the things I really don't like doing in worker placement games is having to buy new workers. It's always a good strategy, but it just feels like something you have to do. If you don't, you fall behind on it. In this game, it does a really good job of still making the training a useful action, but everybody has 5 actions they're going to be able to take over the course of the year. So that's a fun way to start. The other really clever thing here is that each of the actions are very similar to the base viticulture game, but in a 2 to 3 player game, and that's the only way I played is 1 through 3. But in a 2 to 3 player game, you can only use 1 worker per space unless you use your grande. So unlike base viticulture, where generally if you have 3 players, you have 2 spaces open. There's only 1 space you can each put a worker, and you're playing this over 6 years. So that means you've got 6 rounds essentially to get everybody up to 25 points, as well as hit these 10 influence. Very hard thing to do with no bonuses and only 1 worker per space. So there's a way to fix that, and that's with these innovation tiles. There's a space on the board now where you can go there and you can spend $4 to build an innovation. The innovation is going to either replace one of the worker placement spaces, meaning it's going to make it better. So for example, instead of just plant 1 vine, it would say like plant 2 vines and get a victory point or something like that. So they get significantly better if you create an innovation, and that makes it better for everybody. But then there is this other innovation tiles that are available that will replace the worker placement locations, like the kind of the spot that you would put your worker on, and makes it available so that multiple workers could go there. So if you've got somebody that will invest and build one of those, now all of a sudden everybody can plant a vine, or everybody can harvest if you've replaced that spot. As well as those little innovation tiles that make it open to more workers, they have little bonuses printed on them, so that if a skilled worker or grande worker goes there, then you also get a bonus for it, kind of like if you were getting one of the bonuses in the base viticulture. So that's really fun to do. It's really fun to kind of start with this really challenging puzzle, but start to build it out to make it more flexible for people, make the actions better. And the way those innovation tiles come up is that there's basically 2 of the kind of improved locations and 2 of the enhanced spot bonuses available every round, and then they clear off at the end of the round, new ones come up. So you don't always have the same tiles available to pick from. So some of them are a little bit more important, some of them are a little bit less important, but you have to make decisions. Do I invest in this early? That is a super fun part of this game, and I really wish that there was some way to include this in a competitive version of the game, because it was really fun to play with. The last thing, and probably the most impactful part of this, is that when you play this now, you play with an event deck, but there's 8 event decks in the base deck. And so basically you're going to be essentially making wine on a specific continent. And so for each of the 7 inhabited continents of the world, there is a different event deck. So, there's North America, South America, Asia, there's Europe, there's Oceania.
I didn't know we were going to have a geography test, Tim, but you're doing great.
Anyway, so anyway, you're going to play with this event deck, and basically what the event deck does is at the beginning of every year, so you're playing over 6 years, you're going to flip 1 card over, and it's usually going to either give you a little bonus if you go to a specific space, or maybe make something a little more complicated, like only 1 person can plant vines this year, and there's a story with it, so it's kind of neat. It tells a little bit of story about winemaking in that region. And so that changes up every game. Beyond that, each of the event decks have like a mini game that come with it. So just as an example, the Asia deck is pretty neat. When you flip over one of those cards in the event deck, it will say, for example, if at least 2 people use the plant vine action this time, then you're going to replace a little section on the main board with an improved action, like the income track is a little bit improved, or the scoring targets get a little bit reduced. So you can basically improve the usage of the game, but it's a little goal you have to hit in that year. And if you don't hit it, you don't get to do it. You don't get the benefit from it. But that's also, that event deck is one of the ways you're going to get these influence tokens. A lot of these little objectives that happen on these event cards are going to give you an influence, which again, you have to get to 10 cooperatively. The other way you can do it is that there's a space in the winter season where you can spend 8 coins to get an influence. So it's very expensive, very hard to do, but you may have to spend some money to actually get the rest of the influence up there. Each of these event decks, like I said, has a little bit different mini game. One of them, this is, I'm looking at Europe right now. It has little individual objective cards that you can get. North America has this fame track where you're kind of like, it's almost like a tech track where you move around this track as you get fame from these event cards and get little bonuses for them. One of them is a cooperative. I think it's, Oceania is a cooperative thing where basically if you hit one of the goals on these event cards, you give one of your neighbors a bonus. And then if they hit one of the goals, they might give you a bonus. So kind of every one of these plays a little bit different. They're all very fun. I've gotten a chance to play with all 8 of them so far, and lost almost all of them. So that kind of covers the mechanisms that are changed here. You're playing cooperatively or you're playing solo. Now, let me mention really quickly that the solo game here is fantastic, and I will never play Viticulture solo without the Viticulture World expansion in the future, because I think this is a much more, I mean, I like Viticulture solo as is. This is a really, really awesome and fun experience. So this is great that I can play this solo and add this in. I love it. The solo mode is really simple. You flip over a card, shows you what workers you're blocking in your season, but then the person that's blocking you, you can they can basically assist you in some ways too. You can trade with them. If you put your grande worker where they are, you can they can pay you coins to move a worker off their deck. Or they can get rid of coins, which they could otherwise use for technology enhancements. Really clever solo mode, really easy to operate, but you still get all the fun of these event decks and the technology enhancements and all of the other stuff that comes in the game. So great solo mode. All right, so who is this game for? If you like Viticulture, but you'd like to play cooperatively, obviously it's a no-brainer. It's a really fun cooperative game. If you like to play competitively and you don't like cooperative games at all, this probably isn't for you. I don't love cooperative games, but this is one of the more fun cooperative experiences I have had. It reminds me a lot of the Orleans cooperative expansion, which I think was called Invasion. And I liked that a lot because you're essentially still just playing the game of Orleans. You're doing your own actions, kind of building up your own engine, but you've got some cooperative goals. And that's a lot how Viticulture World expansion works. So as a cooperative game, this was one of my favorites and one I'd be happy to go back to because of the cards, the hidden information that's in your hand with all of the cards that you're managing, which is a big part of Viticulture. Very hard game to quarterback, although I could see somebody, getting in there and being like, we really have to do this. You got to focus on this, so you're going to get some of that. But I think it protects you a little bit from the quarterbacking, and it still gives you this fun Viticulture puzzle to solve along with with the other people you're working with. So I think it's a fun cooperative game, but if you really don't like cooperative, this probably isn't for you. The other thing I'll mention is that this is a very, very challenging cooperative mode. Personally, I like challenging cooperative modes. One of my favorite, cooperative and solo games. I love them when they're challenging. Like my perspective is you should never win more than 50% on a cooperative game. Otherwise, it just doesn't feel like you're really working towards anything. But one of my favorite solo experiences, which kind of fits in that same mold for me, is Underwater Cities, which I've never won, and I've probably played it solo like 15 times. And I think that's how Viticulture World is going to be for me, because I'm not a super strong viticulture player. Like I generally don't win. I don't think I'm efficient enough to do really well at it, which means that as a cooperative game, if I'm not doing that well at it, and I sit down with my wife and she doesn't even know viticulture as well as I do, we've not even come close to winning in our cooperative games. Now, there is some different difficulty levels with the event decks, and the starting event deck, which is set in a fake world of Green Goalie. That one is very easy, and I was able to beat that one solo on my first try. So that's a great one if you want an easy intro game. But every one after that, even the medium and the hard level ones, I haven't won once cooperatively or solo. Still had fun playing them all. Still want to keep going back to it. That doesn't bother me. My wife, on the other hand, will not play this anymore because she's like, there's no way we'll ever win this. I feel like it's just a waste. It's futile. It really bugs her that she didn't have a really good shot at winning it, and we didn't with our skill level in playing viticulture. So it is a very challenging game. There is a very easy way to adjust the difficulty, and that is add additional years. The event deck actually has 8 cards in it that you can shuffle to come up in different orders, but you're only playing 6 years. So you could make it a 7-year, or you can make it an 8-year difficulty, and that would solve that problem for you. So it's an easy way to solve it, but just be aware that it's a very challenging cooperative game.
So I played this game with you and Danielle. How many years did we play?
We played all 6, and we didn't finish it, right? We didn't win, but we played 6.
So was that So that's the hardest setting is 6 years.
That's the default setting. What I'm suggesting, I think the starting deck says basically if you want to make it a little bit easier, you can add one more year in it. So I'm kind of taking that, but I don't think it's like an official variant to add more years. But that is how you could make this solvable for someone who just cannot beat it in 6 years.
Tim, so this is a review copy, so everything you just said is clearly biased. I want to know, you are not the biggest fan of cooperative games, strictly cooperative games.
Right.
Are there any strictly cooperative games that you do enjoy and that you would go back to? And is this break through your kind of no co-op game little rule?
Yeah, it does. And again, I mentioned Orleans Invasion already, which is one of the 2 cooperative games that I own that I actually do like. And Orleans obviously you can play it competitive, but there's a cooperative mode on it, and I've really enjoyed my plays of that. Happy to play that anytime. The other is Cthulhu Death May Die, which is a very, very different game, and I don't know why that one hits so well for me cooperatively. But this is definitely in that list. I had a very fun time playing this cooperative, other than my wife's angry stares and frustration that we weren't even close to winning by the end of the game. But it was really fun. I felt like mostly what I was doing was working on my farm, collaborating a little bit to make sure that we didn't get in the way of each other out on the main board, and working together to innovate and kind of hit some of those shared goals. But otherwise, it feels almost like you're playing competitive viticulture. It's got the same rules essentially. But just adds a little bit more interaction with the other players to try to work together.
Now, in order to win within those 6 years, are you going to need to get a little bit lucky? Is that going to frustrate some people? Or do you think there is a skill ceiling there where if you play this game enough, you're going to be able to find your way through the puzzle and consistently win? Or, are you going to have that luck?
My guess is that, like any good cooperative game, there's at least a little bit of luck. I don't know how much. I think for really skilled viticulture players, they probably could consistently win frequently with it. But I don't know that for sure. The only luck that's going to happen here is that if you shuffle up those event cards, which there's 2 variants recommended, you can either play with them 1 through 6, that's the most straightforward, or you can shuffle all 8 together and then they're going to come up in a random order. So that could change a little bit because some of those cards are going to be more impactful how early in the game they come up with. And then the innovation tiles are probably the most critical thing and the most luck-based thing related to the cooperative game. But as you know, viticulture, you're already pretty heavily dependent on the luck of the draw. You're drawing with all these cards as far as what grapes do you get, what orders do you get, what visitors do you get. And that's a fun part of the game to me. That's a fun part of this puzzle of viticulture, regardless of which mode I'm playing. But I think that's going to come into play in the cooperative mode as well. And it's like if everybody doesn't have... Now, there's some cool elements, right? You can, if you put your grande worker on a space with one of your opponent's workers, then you can do a trade. So if you can be like, hey, I really can't use these orders because I don't have the right grapes for it. Does somebody else want them? So you can kind of mitigate that a little bit. But yeah, I think like any cooperative game, there's a little bit of luck here. It will probably always be a challenge, at least the harder difficulty ones for some players, and it will be nearly impossible for more amateur players like myself.
Now, even if you don't quote unquote win, are you still having a fun time? Or when you get to the end of the game, are you flipping the table over and throwing the pieces off and throwing your wine glasses on the ground in disgust?
Yeah, for me, it was a super fun time, just like viticulture is. I rarely ever win viticulture, and which means that I usually don't in the base game beat 20 points or in 25 in Tuscany. But I'm happy if I can get close, if I can just like, oh, I just had one more wine order to fill, or look, I got 6 structures out this time and I get this cool engine going, or I had some clever, visitor cards that really let me do a lot of impactful stuff on this one turn. I always have fun playing it, even when I'm not doing well at it. And the cooperative mode is no different for me. But again, your mileage is going to vary a little bit. I don't mind losing cooperative games at all. I don't mind losing solo games at all. I think usually if I win them, I feel like I probably cheated or did something wrong. So I want cooperative games to be very, very hard and a huge success. Like it's kind of like a huge win if you actually get it done. My wife, on the other hand, felt completely different. She was very unhappy that we didn't have a chance at winning. By the time we got to the 6th season, she's like, we should just give up. I was like, oh, let's just finish out the year. I just want to see how this goes. But when she could tell that there was no way we were going to win, she just didn't even want to try for it. So I think there are going to be some people that get really frustrated by the challenge and the fact that you can't win or aren't like, there's some cooperative games where it's always like it's down to that last card flip or the last turn, like things had just gone my way. I don't think Viticulture World is going to be quite like that. There may be some games where it is, but again, we lost in a pretty major way every time we played it competitive or cooperative rather. All right, so that is all I have to say about Viticulture World. Again, if you like viticulture solo, you should this is awesome. You should check it out. And if you want to try a cooperative, this is a very, very cool expansion. So yeah, I really loved it. Glad I had a chance to play it. All right, let's talk about some future takes. I just have one thing to mention. I think it's important because we are such huge fans of Dune Imperium on this show. I wanted to talk a little bit about the new expansion called Dune Imperium Immortality that just got announced by Direwolf just this last week. And it's going to be coming up for pre-order, I think, within a month or so. So you'll be able to pre-order it from them. And then it'll go direct to retail. So this doesn't go to Kickstarter or anything like that. But if you listen to our Dune Imperium Rise of Ix episode and many episodes since then, you know that I was a huge fan of the Rise of Ix expansion for Dune Imperium. I thought it added so much fun variety, variability, fit right into the game, easy to teach. I loved it. So Immortality looks like it adds a bunch of new stuff, and I'm not sure it's going to fit in quite so smoothly. But let's talk about that really quickly. What does it have? Essentially, there's this new technology track board that you're going to put next to the board. It's called the Tlilax track. I don't know how to pronounce this Dune stuff, but essentially, yeah, Tlilax research board. So essentially what happens is you replace two of your base starting cards, the ones that just give you the one little yellow icon, with new cards, and those ones also have a little microscope icon as your agent action on there. So if you use one of these starting cards now, you're going to use this microscope icon to move up this track, and there's like branching paths with it. And the track is going to give you some little bonuses throughout. It might let you discard cards. It might let you get some extra skill points for that turn, or move up move up one of the alliance tracks, things like that. So just fun little things that are going to happen. Pretty simple to use. But then there's this whole new set of cards that you can buy that will go into your deck that are unique to this section. So one of the things you'll do as you're moving up this little research board is you'll get these buying power that will be for this unique set of cards. And extra cards are fun. It's good variety. The cards offer a couple unique things, but the biggest one that I noticed was there's this new ability called Graft in it. And Graft is the idea that if the card has Graft listed on it, you can play it as an agent action along with another card, and you get both benefits, both agent action benefits at the same time. So that seems like a lot of fun, an opportunity to, have a pretty big agent turn if you can kind of line these up right. So it looks like some fun variety there. There's also the research station on the main board is replaced. There's a tile that goes over it. So instead of getting 3 cards when you go there, you now get 2 cards and one of the research actions to go up this track. So, I think it seems like it will probably blend in pretty well, but just the fact that you're adding in this whole track and new keywords on the cards and stuff like that, I think it may add a little bit more than I'd want to teach on a first play. But I'm really excited about this. This looks like a lot of fun to me. I don't know how much it's going to feel like it. You have to focus on this versus other things, but the way it's integrated, it feels like you're just going to hit it sometimes automatically in the course of the game. And then if somebody really wants to focus on it, they can optimize it. It feels a little bit like the shipping track or the, kind of the new the technology things you can buy in the Rise of Ix expansion, where they give you some new paths. You don't have to focus on them. You can kind of ignore them, but you can focus really heavily and potentially get some cool things happening. Adam, you've looked at this. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that Graft mechanism looks cool, where you can get 2 cards, kind of combine them into one, and you get the benefits from both from going to one of the spaces. That is if the cards have text on them, and you put your agent out in whatever eligible space there is, then you get both the benefits on the cards that are written. I think that's kind of neat. And then this tech track, Tim, like you were talking about, that looks pretty neat too. It reminds me a little bit of the tech track from On Mars, where you have this series of hexagons going from left to right, and you decide, oh, I want to go up to this one, or I want to go down to this one, and you move along, and the powers get a little stronger as you go towards the right. Maybe not stronger, but you can kind of pick your path and chain them together and make things work in your favor. So a little bit of agency there, which I think is nice too. I've said before, I'm still in love with the base game. The Rise of Ix added some more stuff. I'm not quite ready for that yet. And this is just going to be another awesome stuff to add to a game that I love. So I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Jen, does this make you excited to play Dune Imperium with me?
Totally.
Awesome. All right, I'm buying it.
I had a little future take real quick. I'm going to talk about Bloodstones. This is over on GameFound right now. It's a game by Martin Wallace from Brass Birmingham fame and a handful of Stars fame and Australia fame. So he's got quite the repertoire of games under his belt. In this, it's called a fantasy war game with Euro wrappings. The game, presumably, it's going for a bit of elegance and streamlinedness, but it's probably going to have those Martin Wallace quirks. The production looks very nice. It has these kind of flat resin tiles with different characters on them and asymmetric factions. So a lot of the buzzwords you hear in all kind of games these days. But anything by Martin Wallace, I'm going to take a peek at and keep an eye on and learn more about and see what's going on there. Initially, charmed a bit. I'm going to follow it and monitor it. I haven't backed yet. I don't know if I will. But I think a Martin Wallace game is worth a mention and worth a look if you're a fan.
You know, you said the name Martin Wallace and I was interested, and then I looked at the pictures of it and heard War Game and completely not interested. So if you ever back this, maybe we'll play it sometime, but otherwise I think this will completely fall off my radar. Hope you like it if you pick it up.
It's up on TTS. Maybe I'll convince you guys to get a play of it going in, but yeah, who knows?
All right, well, I think that will wrap up this episode. If you enjoy the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We did have a really nice review that came in this week, so I'm going to read it really quickly and give a call out to He's Dad. This is a review that came out of Great Britain on Apple Podcasts, and the title was Favorite Board Game Podcast, and I love that favorite was spelled in that British way with the OU. So it just had that little British touch to the review here. But they said, simply excellent. What I love most is the perfect mix of banter versus genuine affection these guys have for another. Male friends often struggle to achieve such a healthy balance, but I love the way they can have fun by teasing each other and genuinely affirm each other's strengths and positive qualities. Opinions always well considered and helpful that they don't always agree. That was a really touching and well-written review, and these reviews amaze me. I'm like, I just can't actually believe that people listen to this mess of a podcast that we create and then think all these nice things about us. So really nice to read. Thank you for doing that. And this keeps us going. So appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always great to get a touch of kindness from someone we've never met. So thank you so much for that. That's great.
All right. Well, until next week, take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening.